So this story is, it's really being taken out of context on Twitter. Wow, what a shock. Things are being taken out of context on Twitter. Yes. yes, a million times over. Happens all the time. But this one is more egregious than usual. So let me go ahead and throw this up on the screen for you. FDA halts use of antibody drugs that don't work versus Omicron. The regulatory move was expected because the Regeneron and Eli Lilly treatments are less able to target Omicron because of its mutations. Okay, so let me put this in layman's terms for you. The federal government said 2 of the 3 monoclonal antibodies, they've been unauthorized now. They were authorized to treat the original strain of COVID and Delta. Now those monoclonal antibodies are being effectively taken off the market. Now, they still reserve the right to reauthorize them if a new variant comes out and that variant is able to be treated by them. But as of right now, it doesn't work against Delta. There were some studies that came out in December that said that, and there were a number of experts that came forward and said, look, this isn't working at all. And since that's the case, they're like, okay, well, then we would be helping public health and safety if we remove it from the market, because there are also, granted in a very small number of people, but there are some adverse side effects to the monoclonal antibodies. And if you're treating somebody with one of the monoclonal antibodies that doesn't work and they have Omicron, then that's not good, because you can instead be treating them with something that does work, like remdesivir, for example, and they're not doing that. So people might end up getting more sick, and some might even end up dying as a result of that if you sort of leave it on the market. So in response to this, Florida turned around and they have infusion centers for monoclonal antibodies, which, by the way, was a wonderful idea. I highly support the fact that they did that they opened those centers. Texas has them too. The reason why conservative states are more into that is because, generally speaking, the conservative states and some of the conservative and Republican governors have been more anti-vaccine. So they want to have something that they can rely on. So they end up opening up these monoclonal antibody centers. Honestly, I would have opened them up around the entire country. If I was a Democratic governor, I would have opened up a monoclonal antibody infusion center, because it is a treatment that was highly effective. But now, since the facts on the ground have changed, well, they've had to change the regulatory approach. So, and just so everybody understands, as of January 4th, 95% of U.S. COVID cases were Omicron. So it just totally wiped out Delta across the country. That was on January 4th. As of today, it's probably 99 or like 99.9% are Omicron cases, which is why they're taking this step now. So there have been a number of instances where, our officials in the institutions have either lied to us or been dead wrong about something. Based on everything I've read, this is not the case with this instance. It actually doesn't work, and so it's a good thing for them to take it off the market. Now, there's more information, though. So the 2 that they took off the market, one is made by Regeneron and the other one is made by Eli Lilly. But there is another one from GlaxoSmithKline. The one from GlaxoSmithKline has been working. So they're keeping the GlaxoSmithKline one on the market. Now, the bigger problem with that, though, is there's a shortage, of course. So the one monoclonal antibody treatment that works, there's a shortage. Well, this is where you blame Biden, because Biden should have invoked the Defense Production Act to massively increase the supply of all the different antibody treatments, and then it would always be available. Or there would certainly be more of it than now. About 300,000 people have gotten the treatment, and they should have been prepared for this. Also, there's a Pfizer pill that works against COVID. There's a Merck one that doesn't really work, but the Pfizer pill does work, and that's in short supply too. So, look, if it was me and I'm Florida, I'm not going to shut down the monoclonal antibody treatment center. In the interim, I'll transfer it over to a remdesivir center, because that still works against COVID. And then when you get enough of the GlaxoSmithKline antibody treatment, then I would put it back to that monoclonal antibody treatment center, where it actually is the one that works. Or maybe you have a mix of that and the remdesivir treatment center. So, quote, doctors have alternative therapies to battle, this is from the article, battle early COVID-19 cases, including 2 new antiviral pills from Pfizer and Merck. The Merck one doesn't really work. But both are in short supply. Both Regeneron and Eli Lilly previously announced they were developing new antibodies that target Omicron. So this is a very important fact that people need to understand. If this is some sort of conspiracy from Biden and the federal government to restrict a treatment that doesn't work, well, why is it that Eli Lilly and Regeneron are both like, yeah, our thing is not working against Omicron, so we're going to come up with a new antibody treatment that does work on Omicron? It's not some sort of conspiracy. It's not some, attempt to restrict any sort of therapeutics, thereby forcing people to get the vaccine. They want people to get the vaccine, but they don't want to restrict any other treatments that might work on the back end. And Regeneron and Eli Lilly know this, which is why they're trying to create a new formula that works. So regulators have now broadened the use of remdesivir, the first drug approved for COVID-19 to treat more patients. So that's exactly what I was just saying they should do. Now, they say this, though, quote, the drug requires 3 consecutive IV infusions over 3 days when used for non-hospitalized patients. That time-consuming process won't be an option for many overcapacity hospitals facing staff shortages. So that's the only problem with that, is with remdesivir, early treatment works, but early treatment is difficult because it requires IV infusions over a 3-day period. You know, you try getting that much time in your schedule in the midst of work and everything else. And look, you should do it, but it's very difficult for people. So that is one impediment. The other impediment is just like with the monoclonal antibodies and just like with the vaccine, in a small number of patients, there are also side effects that can come along with the remdesivir. The FDA made its decision based on a 560-patient study that showed a nearly 90% reduction in hospitalizations when remdesivir is given within 7 days of symptoms. The study predates the Omicron variant, but like other antivirals, remdesivir is expected to maintain its performance against the latest variant. See, that part's a little sketchy. Now, hold on. You're telling me that we did the study pre-Omicron, and it had a 90% success rate, but we still think it's going to work against Omicron, so we're going to allow this. Well, shouldn't you know it works against Omicron before you go all in on this approach? Because that you have 2 separate standards, one for remdesivir, one for the monoclonal antibodies. You should do at least some sort of interim quick study. It doesn't even need to be peer-reviewed, or do a number of them in the short term, which will show you, does this work against Omicron? So, look, I have a friend who's a doctor, and he seems to believe, no, it does work against Omicron. Okay, fair enough, but there should be more data for that, because it's easy for people to turn around and say, well, you haven't proved this works against Omicron, and you're going to allow it, but the monoclonal antibody treatment you're not going to allow? Now, granted, we know the monoclonal antibody treatments don't work. 2 of the 3 don't work against Omicron, so maybe it's a slightly different story, but you should probably know it about remdesivir before you sort of go all in on it, because it's possible we learn, hey, maybe that doesn't work as well either. But anyway, listen, based on everything I've read, this appears to be a decision that is based on the science. And if it was some sort of conspiracy to restrict treatments that work from people, then why didn't they pull the GlaxoSmithKline one? They left it because it works. So the real criticism here, which is a criticism everybody should be making, is why the hell didn't they increase the supply of these a year ago? Why didn't they do the Defense Production Act? Why don't they have a stockpile as far as the eye can see of this GlaxoSmithKline and monoclonal antibody treatment? And along with the other ones, now granted, the other treatments would be sitting there. We would have overproduced them and they'd be sitting there if we went all in with the Defense Production Act. But fair enough. I'd rather have that sitting there, the excess sitting there that doesn't work, and the one that works, than none of them really available. So that's the real criticism. But of course, you have, Candace Owens came out and said something along the lines of, Joe Biden wants people to die. So the implication is like, they're restricting this drug even though they know it works. That's just not true, man. That's just not true. And that's like Alex Jones tier level conspiracy. It is. So the one that works is still out there. They just need to produce more of it. The Pfizer pill is still out there. They just need to produce more of it. Remdesivir is still out there. I think they have a pretty solid stockpile of that. But this decision they made is not a bad decision. It's not a bad decision at all, in my opinion. If I was in Florida, though, and they're shutting down their monoclonal antibody treatment centers, I would transfer them temporarily to remdesivir centers, but then also keep them open for when the GlaxoSmithKline one comes in greater supply, because they're trying to ramp up production now, but the problem is they're only doing it as the company themselves. They don't have all the backing and the resources of the federal government in the Defense Production Act, which that would be very helpful if they did have that. So anyway, there's the story. Don't let people lie to you and gaslight you and act like, they're restricting it even though they know it works. A lot of the headlines on this have been so misleading. One of the reasons I gave you guys this article is because this is the one headline that was actually kind of honest about it. So anyway, there it is. Hopefully they can ramp up the production of the one that works, because it's desperately needed. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You want to.